Hello everyone and welcome to a game that pretty much ended before it even began. We are in the semifinals of the FIDE Grand Prix, currently being played in Belgrade. As you know, this is the second leg of the FIDE Grand Prix, first one finished by Levon Aronian and Hikaru Nakamura being the top two contenders. Now we are looking for the top two contenders of the second Grand Prix, and then there will be the third one, and whoever does best, two people will qualify for the next candidates tournament. We know the first six and we need two more. So this is the first game of the semifinals, Rapport versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. It's, something that we've seen many times, but it keeps repeating, and it's just, one of the reasons why I also not just left the quote above the board, but it's something that we discussed in the previous video, so we'll be interested to hear in what you guys think about that as well. So let's see what happened and why this ended before it even began. So Rapport with the white pieces opens with d4. We have knight to f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, and of course d5. Maxime goes for his Gruenfeld defense, and you pretty much know this. If you play d4, you know that Maxime goes for the Gruenfeld, and if you play e4, you know that Maxime goes for the Knight of Sicilian. So it's very easy for players to prepare for Maxime. On the other hand, you will get positions that Maxime most likely knows a lot better than you. So it's definitely playing on his territory, unless you really surprise him very well, which is kind of maybe what happened in this game. So here c captures on d5, we go into the main line, e4 challenges the knight, knight captures, b captures on c3, and bishop to g7. So it's pretty much a theme of this opening that it will be a battle for the d4 square, bishop to c4, and now c5. Again, black strikes against the d4 square. We have knight to e2 defending the d4 square, and now black castles to safety. We have bishop to e3, again adding another defender to the d4 square, and knight to c6, really putting a lot of pressure on that d4 square, as we mentioned. And here the absolute most popular move is just castles, but here we have rook to c1. It's the second most popular, so still nothing out of the ordinary. This is something Maxime knows in his sleep. We have c captures on d4, we have c captures, and now queen to a5 with check. We always mention that it definitely makes sense to move the rook away from the a1 square. If the position opens up, you do not want it stranded there. So queen to a5 delivering check, and asking white, what do you do here? So you can defend against this check in a variety of ways. You can play king to f1, which is the most popular move here. Well, you will not be able to castle, but it has been found that it's really not necessary to castle here. The other way is to block with queen to d2. You could also play bishop to d2, but that's a little bit weird because you need this bishop to guard the d4 pawn. Or you could play what was played in this game, and that is rook to c3. An incredibly rare move. It's been played only on a few occasions, but still, probably something that Maxime knows very well. He strikes against the d4 square again. We have e5 attacking d4, and now we advance it, pawn to d5. And now, how do you play here? One way is to just move the knight, but the other way, and the seemingly more correct one, is to play b5. And this is something that Maxime doesn't seem to have amongst his army of lines. And the idea is after b5, challenging the bishop. Here, of course, white will move the bishop, and now you go knight b4. You go after the light square bishop, white will castle, you will capture on d3, and once the queen recaptures, you will now play b4, and look at this, your b pawn traveled all this way, comes to b4 with tempo, attacks the rook. Once the rook moves, this bishop is coming to a6, and there are a lot of white pieces on this light square diagonal. So this is the way to play this. However, after Maxime's move, which is very tricky, it's not going to be as simple, because there are some games in the database where queen to d2 was played. You're just allowing the rook to move, so not trying to blunder anything. But here Rapport goes back, bishop to d2, and it is now, as of move 14, that we have a completely new game. So you are threatening already some nasty discoveries with the rook, but if you look at the position, there really aren't all that many, if any. Because, where will you move the rook? What will you attack? There's nothing to attack, really. So here, just bishop to d7. Maxime says, I'm not afraid of any discoveries here because, well, there just aren't any. But here comes knight captures on d4, e captures on d4, and now rook back to the starting square. Not the starting square, but the second starting square. So rook to c1 opens up a discovery against the queen, and now queen to a3, keeping an active queen. And you are very happy with black because you already have a passed d pawn. White also has a passed d pawn, but yours is, well, could be tricky to grab hold of this one. But now Rapport just plays queen to b3. He offers a queen trade, and why not? You have the black pieces, you go for an early queen trade, you draw the game, and, well, you win the next one with the white pieces, definitely makes sense. So here queen captures on b3, bishop captures on b3, and now rook 8 to e8. Again, makes very much sense. The e4 pawn is attacked. You can't really do all that much with the king on e1. And if you defend it, of course, we will strike against the center with f5. But the question is, should we do this? Because Rapport defends with f3, and now it's a question, what do you play here? Well, best for black is not the move Maxime played most definitely. It's to just play something like rook to c8, but still, it's white whose position is better. But here, after f5, it just all falls apart for Maxime, and this is only move 19. So feel free to pause the video and try to find why it all falls apart for black while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this very, very difficult line to spot. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is, of course, rook to c7. That's the good stuff. We are attacking the bishop here, and there's really not all that much you can do here. Now, you could move the bishop or you could defend the bishop, but defending the bishop isn't really realistic, because if you try and do something like this, bishop g5, that controls a lot of squares. If you play rook to f7, then we just open up a discovery. You lose this rook, so you are losing something whatever you play. And another thing, if you, let's say, play bishop to c8, again, just d6 check, king to h8, and d7, again, you will lose something. So here he goes for the only square possible, and that is bishop to b5. But now comes the move that you had to find in order to play rook to c7, and that, of course, is pawn to a4. This is what Rapport played, and now there really isn't all that much for this bishop to do. Once the bishop leaves this diagonal, d6, d7 is coming, and then with combining all of this with this immense control of all the squares, there just will not be enough squares for the black rook. So here we have bishop to d3, now comes d6 check, opens up a discovery, king to h8, now d7 attacks the rook. And okay, if rook to d8, we already said that bishop to g5 is enough. So here we have rook to b8, but still now comes bishop to b4, attacks this rook, and now once the rook defends, we can easily go bishop to e7. So here, of course, Maxime doesn't even try that. He plays bishop to e5, goes for a counterattack, and now the simplest way to end this is bishop captures on f8. Bishop captures on c7, and now bishop to e7. This is a beautiful move because it gets the bishop out of harm's way, and also if black isn't careful, let's say try something like bishop b5, you go after the pawn here, bishop f6 is checkmate. That's right, that's the power of the bishop pair right there. So after bishop to e7, Maxime has to waste a move to prevent checkmate, king to g7 is played, and now you see the real weakness of f5. Now white just advances the pawn to e5, and now this pawn is coming to e6, and Rapport will have two defended pass pawns on the 7th and the 6th rank. So here we have b5, Maxime looking for some counterplay. He wants to open up the position, maybe get something like this in, but it's all very, very unrealistic. So bishop to f6 check, king to f8, and now e6. With e7 coming, black cannot allow this, so bishop to d8, blocking this pawn push, and now bishop to e5, attacking the rook and going for bishop to d6 check. If this check lands, it's all over, so we have to guard the d6 square. Rook to b6 guards this square, and now just bishop captures on d4. Again, not going for the rook, our real target is the c5 square and grabbing hold of this diagonal. So here we have rook to c6. We can't play anything else, we have to stop bishop to c5 check, and now we have a captures on b5. This is one way to victory, and it's a very sure one, but we're just going to show that it's not even necessary to do this. You could also play a move like bishop to d5. Just force black to relinquish his control over this diagonal, and even if black doesn't want to go bishop to c1 check, let's say black goes back, rook to c7, now we force black, because now we've taken away the c6 square from the rook, and now once black does this, you give up the rook, and now you go for bishop to d6 check, and that's the game. King g7, e7, not much to do here. Bishop to a5 check, you can capture here. Rook d1 check, we're gonna play king e3, rook captures on d5, and finally we promote our pawn to to a queen. Captures, captures, we bring another queen into the game, and of course black is, well, just lost here, down too much material. So it's not even necessary to capture this pawn, but it's, you know, and it's all right. So it only prolongs the game a little bit more. So here we have bishop captures on b5, and now king f2. Now there's no reason to allow such a move. We have king to e7, and now we have bishop to e3. Again, we're saying you are not welcome here. Bishop to g5 will end the game. So bishop to b6, still keeping an eye on this square while hoping to trade off the bishop, but now rook to d1. Now if you capture the bishop, this square will be undefended, but there's really nothing better. Bishop captures on e3 with check, king captures, and now rook to c3 with check. We have king to f4, and he was in this position on move 37 that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here, because after you defend with rook to d3, yes, you have to keep an eye on that queening square. Well, just rook captures on d3, bishop captures, and now the king is, well, free to gobble up all of these pawns. There's nothing black can do here. There's no way to attack any of the white pawns, so it would only be a matter of time before white just gobbles up all of them. You can give a nice discovery here, but it doesn't matter. King h6, the pawns are now falling. It's a game over. So an incredibly impressive game by Rapport, who manages to yet again surprise Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. We've seen Maxime play some very impressive Gruenfeld games, but from time to time he gets really surprised, like he did here with this. He probably knows the line, and he knows that knight to d4 was already attempted, but bishop to d2 just gives black a terrible position to play, and especially after this f5 move, it was just completely unplayable. The position was still very bad here for black, but probably with absolutely best play not lost. But after f5, it just completely crumbles. And you don't expect something like this, because look at the white king. The white king is in the center of the board. You have rooks on e8 and f8, and you also have the bishop pair. So it's not like you have knights. White has the very impressive bishop pair. You also have the very impressive bishop pair, and still there is nothing you can do after f5 is played. So really an impressive showing by Rapport, and it really shows you, well, okay, it would be silly to say that, as we've discussed yesterday during the Capablanca video, that you have to, you know, really prioritize the end game and the middle game, and then only after you reach a certain threshold you should study the openings. Of course, both Rapport and Maxime have reached these thresholds, and they are absolute experts in all parts of the game. But here you can see just how easily one little mistake in the opening means, especially nowadays. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Maxime most definitely didn't, but he will get one more game to try and bounce back and force tie breaks, or it will be Rapport to the finals of this second leg of the FIDE Grand Prix. So yeah, once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank greetings from Zdravko Boom, Zulong, Closebox.com, Lucas Teokaris, and Jonathan Lay for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the semifinals until the end. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.